Shooter, are you ready?
Ready.
Stand by. Shooter, if you're done, unload, show clear.
Welcome to the show, Uncle Glow So Bright. Pistols are the most versatile firearm to be used by the prepared citizen. They're small, pretty compact, and adequate for the self-defense needs for the prepared citizen. They can be carried every day, be used in places with very, very limited storage, can be used for a bedside gun for self-defense at the home, and they are the primary weapon for the prepared citizen in relatively peaceful times. Some advantages of the pistols is that these can be carried hidden and concealed. Both hands can be free to do literally anything else. And they can provide a way to provide self-defense purposes for anti-personnel means. With a competent shooter, can be deployed in 2 seconds or less and engage targets at 28 yards or less. And those are some advantages of them. Some disadvantages of the pistol are that they are inherently more difficult to use than long arms, such as a rifle, for example. A rifle has more points of contact, a rifle can be used in a more stable manner, and a .556 caliber rifle can be used effectively at ranges at 300 yards or 500 yards. While for this, even with a competent shooter, pushing it at 75 yards, maybe 100, most people are incompetently trained or cannot use a pistol. They aren't very useful beyond 15 yards for them. But, we're trying to get good, right? We're not trying to be average or mediocre. Some other disadvantages of the pistol is limited terminal performance. Even for best available loadings for this 9mm Luger handgun, it isn't as effective for use as a rifle or a shotgun, for example. A rifle can still maintain excellent terminal performance, especially at close ranges, but even at far ranges, same with shotguns. With pistols, shot placement is even more critical. Another disadvantage is that these pistols would have limited utility for a Minuteman, militia, or LARPing context, in which the pistol would not be very useful compared to, say, a carried primary semi-automatic rifle. And for example, the weight of a Beretta and a spare magazine for it may be more than a mag or two of .556. Yet as a backup weapon, or as a secondary weapon for someone to carry around, say, a large precision rifle, a shotgun for anti-drone purposes, an anti-material rifle, a machine gun, these are still useful in that sort of context. So in this video of pistols for the prepared citizen, I'll cover the basics on pistols, types of pistols, sizes of pistols, calibers, and what qualities to look out for the pistol for the prepared citizen. There are things out there that I will not cover in depth, but for a very basic understanding, this video is great. So let's get started. Pistols generally fall under 2 different categories. You have semi-automatic pistols and revolvers. Yes, I know there are other types of pistols out there like Derringers and single loading pistols like the Thompson Hunter, but let's not get into the weeds from the forest over here. But semi-automatic pistols, also known as auto-loading pistols, and in the dated context, automatic pistols, which do not apply for pistols in which have a fully automatic firing mode, in which when the trigger is pressed to the rear, more than one cartridge is fired. No, it just refers to how the pistol would fire, unlock, extract, eject, feed, chamber, and lock. And a lot of that would be based on detonation and recoil of the individual cartridges that feed. Most semi-automatic pistols would feed from an internal magazine. Meanwhile, revolvers, for example, the single action army over here, whether the hammer is manually activated or when the trigger is pressed to the rear, all cartridges are fed in a revolving cylinder, most often with 5, 6 shots. Sometimes they would have 8 or 12, but most common 5 or 6. And everything is done through manual action, through springs and all that sort of stuff. Nothing to do with recoil operation of the cartridges. Now we're going to go say in the comment section, well, actually, the British prototype revolver is a semi-automatic revolver. We're not talking about that. We're just talking about very common types that are found in most stores and are highly and widely available. But for the prepared citizen, I find that semi-automatic pistols are a lot easier to obtain, a lot easier to use, a lot faster to reload, and I'd suggest getting one of these unless you live in a restricted environment, which a semi-automatic pistol is more difficult to get. Most pistols would fall under 4 different types of trigger mechanisms. You have single action triggers, double action triggers, double action single action triggers, as well as, for some models of semi-automatic pistol, striker fire triggers. So, for single action triggers, it's probably the oldest type of trigger out there for pistols. For this 1911 over here, for the trigger to be used, the hammer must be fully cocked to the rear, and from there, when the trigger is squeezed, the hammer will fall. Once the hammer has fallen, the trigger can no longer be used and squeezed until the hammer is brought to the rear position, either by manually cocking it or by cycling the slide, either manually or done through firing of a cartridge. From there, the pistol can be used again. For this 1911 to be safely carried, the hammer must be in the rearward position, a chamber must be loaded with a live cartridge, and the manual safety must be activated. Then it can be safely carried and holstered. Single action triggers on repeating firearms have been around for a while. For example, the Colt Single Action Army, which was first designed in 1873, also features a single action trigger in which a hammer must be manually cocked to the rear for it to be fired. However, for this particular model, unless it's a more modern pistol that has a transfer bar safety, the cylinder must be timed so that when the hammer is forward and at a rested position, it rests on an empty chamber. From there, when the pistol is cocked, hammer to the rear, then the cylinder would turn and rotate and have a chambered cartridge. Some very popular examples of single action triggered pistols would be the 1911, the Tokarev, the Colt Single Action Army 1873, the 2011, the FN57. Those are some examples of single action triggers. Now we go over to double action. What does double action mean? Well, I don't have any double action only firearms present as a reference or an example. Here we have a Beretta 92FS. How this works in double action mode would be with the trigger in the most forward position, as well as the hammer also in the most forward position. When the trigger is squeezed over to the rearward position, the hammer becomes cocked due to action of the trigger. There, when the trigger is in the most fully rearward position, the hammer also goes in fully rearward position. The hammer falls, strikes the cartridge. From there, the hammer can be rearmed again simply by having the trigger be in most forward position, and the hammer goes and becomes used again. Some examples of double action triggers would be the double action only variant of the Smith & Wesson J-frame pistol, the Beretta 92D, the Seg P250. Those are some examples of revolvers and semi-automatic pistols that are double action only. Meanwhile, we have double action, single action pistols. These are the most common forms of revolvers you find, as well as not so much today, but a lot of pistols that are semi-automatic developed around the 1980s and 1990s and used around that time. Some examples would be the PM Makarov pistol, and we have the Beretta 92FS. So this pistol will incorporate both the single action trigger and double action trigger. So when a magazine is loaded into the pistol, round is cycled, and then the hammer is decocked. This is very important, have it be decocked. We have it in double action mode. This can also function as your safety. From there, first shot, you have a very long trigger pull. The pistol is cycled. From there, when the trigger is reset into the forward position, take a look at the hammer. It's in the rearward position, just like the single action hammer of the 1911. From there, it's in single action mode. And a common characteristic with a lot of these pistols is that while in single action mode, you have a lot of creep, a lot of slop and slack, and then you have a wall, and then the hammer falls. So having these two distinct trigger pulls can be difficult to use for pistols like this. One advantage for a double action single action pistol is that if you have light primer strikes or lower quality ammunition, you can simply just squeeze the trigger again and have another cycle with the action mechanism. Firing pin can strike the cartridge again. However, having two distinct trigger pulls may be difficult. However, for some reason, for many revolvers, such as the Smith & Wesson K-frame, the Ruger GP100, a double-action, single-action revolver can have the hammer manually be cocked to the rear and have a much nicer, crisper trigger squeeze, which can facilitate for better accuracy to the shooter. Very common examples of double-action, single-action pistols would be the Beretta 92FS, the PM Makarov, the Colt Trooper revolver. Those are some very common examples of double-action, single-action pistols. One of the most common action mechanisms for pistols found today would be striker fired, in which there is a kind of like a like pulling back on the plunger of a pinball machine. You have a spring around a firing pin. So most of these pistols behave just like that of the single action pistol in practice, in which there is an internal striker. When the trigger is fully squeezed to the rear, striker goes forward, and the trigger cannot be used again unless the pistol is cycled. So with some designs like Glock derivatives, when the trigger is squeezed to the rear, and then there's a little bit of wall and such, that is for the striker to be activated, and then when fully pulled to the rear, then released, striker goes forward, firing pin hits the cartridge. Very common examples of striker-fired handguns would be the Glock, the Smith & Wesson M&P 9, the High Point. Those are some common examples of striker-fired handguns. I generally find handguns to be in three different sizes. You have very large pistols, which are primarily intended for either hunting or wilderness defense against large animals such as bears, cougars, and other beasts, moose. And some examples of that would be large pistols and magnum cartridges like the Smith & Wesson Model 29 44 Magnum, the 50 AE Desert Eagle. You have the BFR and 4570 Government. Those are some examples of really big revolvers, and those are a certain niche, not necessarily for everyday carry in an urban environment, and I'll not talk about those. I don't even have examples of those on hand. Then you have duty handguns, or Handguns, which are originally sized and used for duty use to be carried by either military or law enforcement, and there'll be various different variations on that. The Glock 17, for example, a double stack 9mm pistol with a 4.6-inch barrel, if I remember off the top of my head. And then you just have variants of that, such as the Glock 19, which has a shorter grip, a shorter slide and barrel, brought down to 4 inches. You have your 1911 Government with a 5-inch slide and barrel. And then you have other variants that are slightly smaller, like the Commander with a 4.25-inch barrel, if I remember off the top of my head, the PM Makarov. These handguns can be extremely versatile and can be used for both concealed carry, if done properly, but you may have to dress around the gun and the holster, or can easily be carried in a high-quality holster that is secure. So some examples would be that, like the SIG M17 or the compact variant, the M18. You have the Glock 17, you have the Glock 19 compact. I mean, you also have crossover variations like the Glock 45, which has the same size slide and barrel length as Glock 19, but with a longer frame with the Glock 17. And you have other sorts of variations, like the Glock 34, which has a longer slide, and a Glock 17 full-size grip, optimized for competition use, and sure, that is a competition pistol. I'd put these in a category of duty handguns, stuff where it'll be used in police or military service. Then you have your compact carry pistols, pistols that are designed from the ground up for the purposes of concealed carry. One example I have on here would be the Smith & Wesson M&P 9 Shield Plus, which has a staggered, not quite single stack, but like a 1.5 stack frame. You have the SIG P365. You have the Smith & Wesson J-frame, a compact 38 special revolver that only holds 5 shots. Very small pistols that are deliberately designed for maximum concealment. Significantly smaller than even a compact duty pistol like a Glock 19 or its equivalents. Now, one thing that is more difficult about these sorts of small pistols is that to have them be carried openly, which kind of defeats the point. To have a good duty holster that has some sort of active retention mechanism, it would be significantly more difficult to find. So be careful of that sort of caveat. But for most people, especially for people that have to adhere to a certain type of dress code or live in hotter environments, like very humid environments like in Florida or out in, like, say, Phoenix or Texas or whatever, these might be a good option for a handgun for the prepared citizen. One thing is that while like the Shadow Systems MR920, which is a Glock 19 analog, and you have the Smith & Wesson Shield Plus, you have a optic, a flashlight, and this one holds, I believe, 12 shots. This one holds 15 as standard capacity. The accessories on this sort of pistol are not as good or robust as something on this. Some examples of the compact carry pistol, like I mentioned before, the Smith & Wesson M&P Shield Plus, the Smith & Wesson Bodyguard, the Ruger LCP, the Ruger LCR, the Smith & Wesson J-frame, the Glock 43, the Glock 43X. Those are some examples. And these are not very, very, very strict definitions. There's definitely some blurriness. There's some overlap. For example, the Glock 43X, a single stack slim handgun, chambered 9mm Luger with aftermarket staggered magazines. You can get 15 shots inside, so you have a much smaller pistol than this while having the same capacity. You have the Glock 26, a even smaller variant of the Glock 17, can share Glock 17 magazines with a much smaller grip that is about about like this big, and a much smaller slide. That isn't really a duty pistol, but it's derived from one. Then you have other stuff, for example, the SIG P365, which with a long grip, you can have 17 shots on it with a very, very small package. Or that whole firearm can be converted to the P365 Flux, which can feature 20 rounds of ammunition, a 6-inch barrel, an optic, and can be carried appendix. And that is very, very interesting. We have basically the features of a PDW in a compact appendix concealable package. But in general, yeah, there's blurring and overlap. I find pistols to be in 3 sizes: big pistols, duty pistols, and compact carry pistols. Now, for comparing sizes of handguns, I highly recommend the website Handgun Hero. Check it out. They have side-by-side comparisons. You can even overlay 2 models to each other for a comparison. Let's go talk about handgun ammunition. Now, sure, you can have very large calibers like 44 Magnum, 50 Action Express, 454 Casull, among others, that can deal with taking out very large wildlife such as bear, cougar, moose. A lot of those pistols are not generally concealable for everyday carry. Which brings us down to compact carry pistols and duty pistols that are chambered in. The most common for duty pistols would be chambered in 9mm Luger, 40 Smith & Wesson, 45 Auto, and even like 10mm Auto. But for most common calibers, it would be 9mm Luger. And for compact carry pistols, smaller cartridges are there, such as at most 9mm Luger, and smaller than that, most commonly 380 Auto, 38 Special, 32 Auto, 25 Auto, and 22 Long Rifle. And for what sort of cartridge to use for these sorts of duty pistols, you know, I'd say that 9mm Luger is more than adequate. And for terminal performance, how it goes against target, it doesn't really matter too much. There isn't really much of an appreciable difference. But with 9mm Luger, you get a wide variety of ammunition available for it, the most inexpensive loading of its type, and you have very good magazine capacity, relatively little wear on the pistol itself, and pretty easy to shoot. Other cartridges out there like 40 Smith & Wesson have been disused. They have excessive wear on handguns, they're quite snappy, and everything is more expensive for not much of a gain, and you also have a capacity loss. And then for compact carry pistols, there can be an issue of having the cartridge be too big for the pistol. Now, what does that mean? Well, there are some pistols that are identical to size to the Glock 19, which the standard configuration is a 9mm. I forgot the exact model name. I'll put down the text in the description, or a little like thing down here. But you can get one of these pistols, same exact frame, same exact barrel length, slide, ergonomics, everything as a 9mm Luger version, but in 380 Auto. That is significantly softer in shooting. However, for a very, very, very small pistol like the Ruger LCP, also chambered in 380, it'd be incredibly high recoiling, incredibly snappy, and unpleasant for use. And for these compact carry pistols, unless it's more optimized, more modern, and has the ability to have a full firing grip like the Smith & Wesson M&P Shield Plus, which is chambered 9mm Luger, by the way, recoil may be excessive. However, the compromise is that for these very small calibers like 22 Long Rifle, 32 Auto, 380 Auto, is that hollow point ammunition may not reach velocities out of short barrels to reach expansion threshold. Let me go talk about hollow point ammunition. Hollow point ammunition is generally being used for personal protective and self-defense purposes, in which you have a soft point or a hollow cavity. When striking a soft medium such as flesh, the bullet would expand out. This is very apparent in ballistic gel examples. However, when striking hard material, such as drywall, wood, whatever, it would behave very similarly to that of a full metal jacket round. One thing, like full metal jacket is the most common form of loading for pistols or most firearm cartridges in general. Excellent for practice. When selecting both hollow point carry ammunition and full metal jacket ammunition, there are some different trains of thought of it. However, make sure that your defensive ammunition is within the parameters of standard bullet weights and standard bullet loadings. Or if your pistol can handle it, plus P if you choose to do so, at the expense of recoil control and cost. For example, a 9mm pistol over here in 9mm Luger, the standard operating range of cartridges for the weights would be from 115 grain all the way to 147 grain. So the most common 3 bullet weights for this particular cartridge is 115 grain, 124 grain, 147 grain, in either standard pressure or plus pre overpressure rounds. Make sure that your carry ammunition, which should be hollow point ammunition, I suggest as a rule of thumb, at least 100 rounds through your particular carry pistol before you verify that it's good to go, and also 1,000 rounds of practice ammunition, full metal jacket ammunition, and ensure that this pistol properly cycles. There is higher quality, higher tech ammunition that is more consistent, but may be prohibitively expensive, such as Federal HST or Spear Gold Dot, which is often used by law enforcement. I'd use that as a carry gun, as a carry ammunition, but ensure that enough rounds is put through the pistol that you carry to have it be vetted. Also ensure that the strike of your point of impact, where your bullet strikes on target, is as close as you can between your practice ammunition and your full metal jacket in your carry ammunition. An alternative train of thought is to practice and carry with the same lot of ammunition. While it can be full metal jacket ammunition, I don't recommend it, but it also could be inexpensive economy hollow point ammunition. For example, for 9mm Luger, Remington Train to Defend 115 grain hollow point ammunition, or for like IWI 115 grain hollow point ammunition, which is about the same price, about the same quality. Other ammunition for revolvers out there which could be used for both purposes would be soft point ammunition like 125 grain 38 special soft point ammunition, which can be used for both practice and defensive use. But keep in mind for ammunition. Now back to like calibers and stuff like that. For compact carry pistols, make sure that you train proficiently with it and you can have effective hits on target, especially with more anemic rounds. More modern semi-automatic pistols like the P365 and 9mm Luger or the Smith & Wesson Shield Plus or the Glock 43X can be relatively pleasant to shoot with this sort of ammunition. Otherwise, you may have to go for even smaller pistols like do a 22 long rifle, which is not recommended, but it's better than nothing or not having a handgun at all. Pistols, weapon mount lights need to be a certain shape for it to be fit inside of a holster. On rifles, you can use a weapon mounted light that's on a pistol on a rifle, but it's not going to be as effective as a dedicated rifle light, depending on what your use case is. However, one thing is that changing the exterior dimensions of the gun, like adding a holster, adding the light, adding a optic on it, will be some variables to keep in mind and be mindful of. So and with tight-fitting Kydex holsters like this, I suggest either getting only 2 of these types of pistol-mounted weapon lights for a duty pistol. Either the Streamlight TLR 1HL or get the Surefire X300. I prefer the X300. It's a bit more expensive. However, I prefer the ergonomics and performance of the light. But it's all down to personal preference. Either of them are good. I wouldn't suggest, however, for mounting a flashlight intended on a compact carry gun, such as a P365 or this Smith & Wesson Shield Plus, where the performance of these lights is significantly more compromised. And some people might think that it's more aesthetically pleasing to have the light be flush with the end of the slide. I disagree with that. One thing is that the bezel of the pistol weapon mount light for these larger ones is that it can function as a standoff device. Why is that important? Pistols would be used in close engagements, and if the barrel and slide is knocked out of battery, then the trigger can't be squeezed. You have a dead gun. However, the bezel, the front part of this weapon mounted light, can act as a shroud. Another issue is that performance of these pistol mounted lights are not as, they can be better. So why compromise on that if you have like a full-size duty gun? The light on this isn't good. This isn't good on this TLR6. Meanwhile, on the Surefire X300, you can like just absolutely blind someone and stun them, which gives you a little bit more time to react defensively. So, unless you have a compact carry gun, stick to a full-size pistol light and stick to these two ones, the Surefire X300 or the Streamlight TLR1 HL, for holster compatibility. Don't get something off-branded and then you can't find a holster for it, or have to get a custom-made holster that would result in having something that is an overall more expensive package and not having as good of a performance. It doesn't make sense. However, keep in mind is that a weapon-mounted light is not a substitute for a standalone handheld light, just a supplement. A weapon-mounted light just makes it easier to illuminate a target while holding a handgun. Otherwise, for any other purpose, use a handheld light. You can use it for administrative tasks. You can point it at an unknown thing without pointing a firearm at it. It's not illegal to point a flashlight at someone or something or an unknown thing. However, it may be illegal to use a handgun to point it at something without proper justification first. Another thing is that if your handgun does not have a weapon-mounted light on it, you can still use the weapon-mounted light in conjunction with a pistol. There are different methods to do so. But before you choose a weapon-mounted light on your pistol, get a good handled light first. Handguns can be carried in a wide variety of means due to their relatively compact size. This can be openly carried, concealed carried, or off-body carry. Now I find that for open carry of firearms, it really needs to be done in a way that there is some sort of retention mechanism on the holster. Whether it be some sort of active lock or retention mechanism, which is activated not with the index finger, but either with the thumb or middle finger, some sort of strap, some sort of thumb brake, or a flap of some sort. Just something to provide that extra layer of security to prevent the handgun from just falling out of the holster. I find that a lot of these very old military-style flap holsters, not very useful. Very slow, difficult to draw from, and oftentimes it can't really be carried around in the chamber safely. If you can find something else other than this, get that. However, one thing I do not recommend would be, in holsters, is a holster that has an active retention mechanism, which is actuated with the index finger. I find them to be unsafe and fragile. And for many of these things, like the Blackhawk Serpa, the Phobos, the SciTac holster, is that when drawing, especially under stress or when the mechanism gets jammed, which often does happen, is that the handgun will be drawn in one single motion with the index finger of push down, push down, push down, squeeze the trigger, boom, you blow a hole through your leg.
I just fucking shot myself. Oh, son of a bitch! I just shot my...
Now, people would say, oh, it's just a training issue, it works for me. These mechanisms are incredibly fragile, and gravel, sand, debris, anything can gum up the mechanism. brick it, and the gun would be stuck chambered in a holster in an unsafe state. Or the lock could just simply break off and a whole handgun would just fly off and you'd lose your handgun, so I wouldn't recommend that. Another disadvantage for openly carrying a firearm would be that you're visibly armed. This means that, especially in an urban environment, you would not be able to enter certain areas because you're visibly armed. They don't have there's a law or a policy that prevents you from entering armed in there. Another thing is it could draw a lot of negative attention. This sort of negative attention could be from people freaking out that you are lawfully carrying a firearm and then calling the cops on you and you have to deal with the cops, which is very unpleasant. Or you can deal with, say, a criminal who could target you. When you're vulnerable, you could be seen as a target and have your gun be taken away from you. You'd be robbed. You would not have ability to draw safely. And that would be very bad. I also find that for openly carried holsters, they don't offer much of a speed advantage of drawing compared to a properly trained and proper draw stroke on a concealed carry thing. Yet for, say, high-profile appearances such as, say, Minutemen, militia, LARPing around, competition, an open holster is the way to go. One other disadvantage is that with very small compact carry pistols over here, it will be difficult to find a large open holster that has that is able to fit these very small pistols. But for extremely popular large pistols, in full-size pistols like the Glock 17, the 1911, finding competent holsters with a good retention mechanism like the Safariland ALS or ALS SLS, easy to find. So that is my own take on openly carried. For concealed carry, this is my own favorite type of carry, which is where you have the firearm actively carried on you, but it's out of sight. There are several different ways to do it. You have your outside the waistband holsters, you have inside the waistband, such as appendix carry, which instead of having it be on your right or left head, depending on your handedness, right in front of you. This is a very, very, very compact way to conceal. And for many popular models of handgun, very easy to find a holster. And for openly carrying, you just find a holster that matches a gun and you can mount it on your equipment, ideally with a Safariland QLS fork or an adapter to one. For concealed carry, there are several more things to consider. Can the holster fit my gun? Can it safely be carried? Can it be hidden? Is it comfortable? Is the holster durable? Those are more considerations to keep in mind than, say, dealing with openly carried. And for concealed carrying, you may have to dress around the gun in some certain way and have a cover garment on it. You would need a rigid belt to carry the holster. Either a stiffened nylon 1.5 inch belt or a leather belt with some sort of stiffened reinforcement that is also 1.5 inches. However, for not wearing a belt, there are also other chassis and rigs in which can be used to clip onto the waist of your pants or can be worn under clothes. And this is also good for, say, women who wear clothing that does not have any pockets or provisions for a belt, like the Filster Enigma. But for concealed carrying, it can be used in a very effective way. You can do any other tasks such as bending down, picking things up, driving, doing daily activities while having a handgun be on you but out of sight and out of mind. Yeah, you can deploy quickly in 2 seconds or less. Another advantage that concealed carry offers is the ability to carry in non-permissive environments. A non-permissive environment is one in which if you are visibly armed, it could lead to severe consequences afterwards, whether it be, say, a violation of law or a violation of policy, for example. And one example for concealed carry in a non-permissive environment, however, I'll do caveat this with I am not your lawyer. I do not have any legal advice to you. Do so at your own risk. Your own personal safety is at your own, you manage your own personal safety. You be the judge of that. But for an example of concealed carry in a non-permissive environment in which the person who was carrying their firearm was able to save their own life as well as the lives of others would be like over in Indiana, Elijah Dickens. Inside of a shopping mall which has a policy that prohibits and forbids people from carrying firearms into the building, like a concealed handgun. At that time, an active shooter armed with a long gun that disregards the laws and the policies in the first place and starts murdering people, Elijah Dickens was able to swiftly draw his handgun and very, very, very quickly neutralize and eliminate that threat. And he was doing so in a non-permissive environment, the mall. But for the consequences of him is that he was not charged by the police in that certain circumstance. In your area, in your jurisdiction, they might turn out differently. Handle your own personal safety. You be the judge on that, but handle that at your own discretion. Act accordingly. But I find that concealed carry is a great thing to have. As far as for holsters, I don't find the sidecar style ones to be that good myself. For these sorts of appendix holsters, Filster makes some pretty good ones. For these ones over here, not my handgun, not my holster, I find that the plastic injection molded clip over here sucks. Replace it with a retrofitted metal clip that is a lot more durable and secure than this one. I see people draw their handgun and then take the holster with the handgun. Not good. For example of like a really common handgun, the Glock 19 over here, or its copies, a plethora of very good holsters, so I can find one that I like exactly, fits me perfectly, and I enjoy it very much and is durable, like the Tenacore holster, which for the most part they're stuck with Glock 19s or so as their pattern of handgun for use. I tried other holsters in the past, Bravo Concealment. Their quality control used to be quite excellent, and then now they kind of fell off. I've even broken those holsters, not under like hard use, but under daily carry, and that would have been really bad for me if I just lose a handgun, especially in a non-permissive environment, hypothetically. So keep that in mind. Another thing to keep in mind is that when concealing a handgun, if you overdress, like wear either a vest or overdress compared to, like, say, the weather, then that might be defeating the purpose of concealed carry, and someone who might look at you would think that you might be carrying a weapon. Some other carry options to consider would be a rigid holster that is inside of a fanny pack, especially if you're doing athletic activities such as jogging. Let's move on to off-body carry. So off-body carry would be the handgun is not directly on your person. It's in a bag, a purse, a glove box. It's something I do not recommend. For example, like, having like a handgun shoved inside, like this high point shoved in a Crown Royal bag. Really classy, but at the same time, I can't really find good holsters for this. I find that off-body carry to be not good. There are several different ways we can lose the the container. You will not have eyes on it. It could easily be stolen. Firearms that are stolen out of vehicles have contributed a lot to crime, and they're quite slow to draw. I would not recommend it. Most handguns feature a sighting system, the most basic of which would be iron sights, like on this Hi-Point C9 over here or this Glock 19. They are inexpensive, low profile, and quite robust. In fact, most handguns out there, until ones that are recently developed since the 2010s or so, would only feature iron sights as a sighting system. However, if you do want to mount a slide-mounted reflex red dot sight, those have been more popular since around the 2010s. However, back then in 2003, Kelly McCain has been experimenting in putting doctor sights on Glocks. Sure, before there had been in competition use tube sights or the Seymour sight for competition, but those are a bit too big and bulky and not as robust for shoving inside of a duty holster or for concealed carry purposes. Now, for slide-mounted reflex red dot sights, while at the additional expense of having one out there, I find them to be a lot more effective and a lot more useful than just basic iron sights. I find that with less repetition and practice, I'm able to get faster and more accurate speed, draws, follow-up shots, all that sort of stuff, be able to hit the target at further ranges and identify hits. And one thing that is great is that I only have to juggle between one plane of focus, the target, rather than having to deal with three of them with iron sights, the rear sight, the front sight, and the target, which is quite annoying and difficult. However, to mount the red dot sight on the slide of a handgun, you will need to have either a direct mount, which would match the footprint, which has the matching footprint or mounting pattern to the optic, or have some sort of modular plate system like the Walther system or the Glock MOS system. I do find that the direct mount system is a lot more preferable, as the optic can sit lower in the firearm, which means you can use existing iron sights in some cases, and there's less points of failure. If the plate is knocked out of line, or if the plate is not available at all, depending on what sort of pistol you have, that might be difficult, meaning to find a aftermarket solution, which is an additional expense and another problem to deal with. As far as for the optics mounting footprint, there are several ones out there, and you need to find the right one for the optic to use that can mount on the firearm you use. Well, the oldest one out there would be the Doctor or Noblex style footprint, which has been around since the 2000s and have been used more as like a piggyback option on prism optics or backup optics. Until the early 2010s, the Trijicon RMR Type 2 has been robust enough for that purpose and is the most popular mounting pattern, the RMR pattern, which has been used for Trijicon reflex sights, as well as popular offerings from Holosun and some others such as Olight or Osight or so. Alternatively, there are different patterns out there. For many enclosed optics out there, you have the Holosun 509T pattern, which can mount on a plate, which can mount on an RMR pattern, or you have other ones out there like the Aimpoint Acro pattern for the Aimpoint Acro P2 optic or the Steiner MPS. There is also the Holosun K type footprint for micro-compact pistols like Smith & Wesson Shield, plus the SIG P365. You have other types of things out there like the Vortex Venom for the Vortex reflex red dot sights. There are several, the Leupold Delta Point Pro, which is used by Leupold and SIG for their full-size handguns. There are several different ones out there. I mean, you have like the Leupold Delta Point Micro, I believe this is called, which is kind of weird and funky. Not my pistol, not my optic, not too sure what this is, but this is an option for micro carry guns. But you have to be careful and mindful and make sure you have the right optic, which is compatible with the optics footprint you have. Now, if you don't have a new pistol that has this sort of provision, you can get older pistols out there. Police trade-in Glock 17 and Glock 19 pistols, very similar to this one, can be found as surplus right now, which do not have the modular plate system. You can find them inexpensively for $300, $350 on the used market. Yet you would need to go and take it to a gunsmith, have a direct mill for, say, a Trijicon RMR, for example, have the slide be refinished to cover the bare metal, and then mount your optic on there. However, that can be quite cost prohibitive, and it might be cheaper to just buy a separate pistol altogether and then sell the one you already have, if you decide to choose to have that. One thing to keep in mind is with having optics on handguns, you may need to have a different holster that is compatible. Safariland duty holsters for Glocks and other similar pistols, for example, do have provisions for adding a light and an optic. Some carry holsters, there's a gap in top of the holster, which can facilitate with or without an optic. So this one without an optic, this one that does not have can still be used as well. Also be mindful of if the holster is compatible with suppressor height sights. But if you are willing to handle the additional expense, I strongly recommend getting an optic for the pistol. If not, that's also acceptable to it. But speaking of other attachments, weapon-mounted lights. Now, on pistols, weapon-mounted lights need to be a certain shape for it to be fit inside of a holster. On rifles, you can use a weapon-mounted light that's on a pistol on a rifle, but it's not going to be as effective as a dedicated rifle light, depending on what your use case is. However, one thing is that changing the exterior dimensions of the gun, like adding a holster, adding the light, adding a optic on it, will be some variables to keep in mind and be mindful of. So and with tight-fitting Kydex holsters like this, I suggest either getting only 2 of these types of pistol-mounted weapon lights for a duty pistol. Either the Streamlight TLR 1HL or get the Surefire X300. I prefer the X300. It's a bit more expensive. However, I prefer the ergonomics and performance of the light. But it's all down to personal preference. Either of them are good. I wouldn't suggest, however, for mounting a flashlight intended on a compact carry gun, such as a P365 or this Smith & Wesson Shield Plus, where the performance of these lights is significantly more compromised. And some people might think that it's more aesthetically pleasing to have the light be flush with the end of the slide. I disagree with that. One thing is that the bezel of the pistol weapon light for these larger ones is that it can function as a standoff device. Why is that important? Pistols would be used in close engagements, and if the barrel and slide is knocked out of battery, then the trigger can't be squeezed. You have a dead gun. However, the bezel, the front part of this weapon-mounted light, can act as a shroud. Another issue is that performance of these pistol-mounted lights they can be better. So why compromise on that if you have like a full-size duty gun? The light on this isn't good. This isn't good on this TLR6. Meanwhile, on the Surefire X300, you can just absolutely blind someone and stun them, which gives you a little bit more time to react defensively. So, unless you have a compact carry gun, stick to a full-size pistol light and stick to these 2 ones, the Surefire X300 or the Streamlight TLR 1HL, for holster compatibility. Don't get something off-branded and then you can't find a holster for it, or have to get a custom-made holster that would result in having something that is an overall more expensive package and not having as good of a performance. It doesn't make sense. Smooth crown. There are external brakes present or compensators. For example, this Glock 19, which is actually Glock 19C, has ports cut in the barrel and on the slide. This can change the felt recoil impulse to, instead of having it be a muzzle rise, it can be a rearward shove. And that can be great for faster follow-up shots. One thing to keep in mind is don't put a ported barrel into an ordinary slide. That would cause serious problems. You could permanently destroy your slide. So don't do that. Another thing is that with compensators, whether it be an external bolt-on compensator or an internal one, these handguns would be less tolerant of limp wristing and may not accept lighter bullets of standard pressure ammunition. For example, I know someone who have a compensated custom Glock they made would absolutely refuse standard 115 grain full metal jacket ammunition. The gun would not cycle. And this is a problem where you can't economically train with a pistol, not be proficient with a pistol, and then you would not be good at shooting the pistol. And you have to rely on more expensive ammunition, which might not be as cheap or available to acquire. Also, I find that most barrels of handguns are more accurate than the shooter. So replacing a barrel isn't really something to be too worried about unless there's an obvious catastrophic failure. Alternatively, there are barrels that have a threaded muzzle. What does that mean? Well, a threaded muzzle can be used to facilitate the addition of a suppressor. Might be used in some niche circumstances, but for daily carry, I wouldn't think it's a necessary thing to buy. One thing to keep in mind is that changing major internal components of the firearm, like a barrel, could impact reliability and accuracy. So verify that the stuff is good before using it to defend your life with it. And with different tolerances and quality control out there with these parts, any sort of modifications to a firearm could degrade these sorts of positive things on it. Glocks, for example, in completely stock form, run excellently. However, when you start doing stuff like adding aftermarket barrels, changing out the guide rod, changing out the recoil system, modifying the trigger, it could lead to some serious reliability issues, and that isn't good. For ammunition, outside of big magnum calibers, it doesn't really matter too much for terminal ballistics out of this pistol. I'd say stick to 9mm Luger or greater, and for compact carry pistols, manage with what you can find the best. I find that 380 or 9mm Luger may be the best option, but if you go too small for the pistol, you might as well go for a smaller caliber, like 22 long rifle or so. But I find that within this intermediate category, before magnum calibers like 38 Special, 9mm Luger, 40 Smith & Wesson, 357-6, 30 Super Carry, 45 Auto, terminal performance, there isn't really too much of an appreciable difference between the two. And at that point, might as well go for having a high round count available for the gun before the gun breaks, having more cartridges be fit into the magazine, have inexpensive cartridges, and a shootable recoil impulse, which is why I would recommend, if you're going to go get a handgun for personal protection and concealed carry, 9mm Luger is the cheapest and simplest to deal with. Okay, so once you got some basics out of the way, what are the qualities of a good handgun that a prepared citizen should look out for? Well, I'd say look for a handgun that is reliable, can have decent ergonomics, has an excellent amount of holsters available for it, have inexpensive yet high quality magazines, and be chambered in a cartridge that is readily available, inexpensive yet offers good terminal performance. So, what does that mean? Well, having a handgun be reliable is self-explanatory. The handgun needs to work reliably, especially when deployed to defend yourself. Having an unreliable handgun is something that should not be there. And if you do have one, get rid of it and get something else, or maintain it properly. As far as for excellent holster selection, having an extremely popular model of handgun over here, like a Glock 19 or a SIG P365 or a Smith & Wesson J-frame, that makes it a whole lot easier to find a holster that is comfortable, durable, conceals well, and is secure. This is even doubly so if you choose to mount a weapon-mounted light to it and an optic. That could limit your own holster availability. There are several excellent handguns out there, but without that holster support, I don't find much use in them. And I'd rather have an excellent holster with an adequate gun than a phenomenal gun and a poor holster. So that is one thing to keep in mind. Decent ergonomics. Some people may have different hands, like people with bigger hands may find that will not be able to get a full firing grip on a compact duty frame like a Glock 19, for example. Yet, they might find that a pistol with a longer grip, like a Glock 45, may be more appropriate. For magazines, I'd say stick to factory magazines or Mekgar. There are a few other ones out there, like for 1911s, like Wilson combat magazines are also good, but in general, stick to factory magazines or Mekgar magazines, and Mekgar is often the OEM for many types of firearms. But some models of pistol out there, the magazines would cost $50, $60, even $80 each, and I find that to be quite prohibitive and ridiculous. Something like this Glock over here, you can find inexpensive factory magazines that are incredibly high quality for less than $20 new. As far as for calibers, outside of Magnum calibers that are really big, like especially designed for wilderness survival, like 44 Magnum, 10mm auto, hotly loaded, 454 Casull, 50 Action Express. For these duty handguns, like 9mm Luger and above, so 9mm 357 SIG, 40 Smith & Wesson, 45 Auto, and 10mm 38 Special. There isn't really much of an appreciable difference between these types of cartridges. In fact, if you get more hotly loaded cartridges like 40 Smith & Wesson, it will induce much higher wear and less favorable shooting performance in terms of like follow-up shots, accurate aiming, rapid shooting, all that sort of stuff than a 9mm Luger counterpart. And between these calibers, for terminal performance, it doesn't offer much of an appreciable difference. And you get other compromises like increased cost per cartridges, lower magazine capacity, higher wear in the gun, and other problems like that. So stick with 9mm Luger. It's the cheapest type of cartridge for its type, high round capacity, and has great terminal performance on target. Now for smaller compact carry pistols, it can range from 22 long rifle, 25 auto, 32 auto, 380 to 9mm Luger is the most common cartridges for that. Also 38 Special. Now for that, these handguns are already a compromise in terminal performance compared to, say, rifles and shotguns. But for pushing to these very, very, very small pistols, stick with the largest caliber that you can manage. For a Glock 43X or SIG P365, for example, stick with 9mm Luger. For really small pistols like a Ruger LCP, might be too much to have it in 380 auto, might be too snappy and unpleasant to shoot and train with, so maybe go for 22 long rifle. But be careful that those pistols have limitations on target. For a prepared citizen looking out for a handgun, select a handgun that is reliable, has decent ergonomics, has excellent holster support, has widely available, inexpensive, and high-quality magazines for it, and chambered in a cartridge that is inexpensive to use, yet provides good terminal performance. Now that I've talked about the basics of handguns, carry methods, accessories, and calibers, and other things for it, as well as qualities to look out for in a good handgun and a good holster, what do I use? That's a fair question to ask. Here I use is a Shadow Systems MR920 9mm Luger handgun. This pistol is a copy of the Glock 19, however offers many ergonomic benefits. I like the texturing on the frame, I like the magazine release, I like that the sights on it, in stock form, clear over the optic, which is a Holosun 407C. I pair it with a Surefire X300 for excellent holster support. I'll be able to illuminate with two hands, and also it acts as a way to provide faster follow-up shots and reduced felt recoil. I pair it with a Tenacor Arc Sol for a Glock 19 with an X300 and fits well even with an optic. I find that this holster is excellent for me. It's durable and I like the ergonomics of it. I find it to be well built. I use two HSGI elastic pouches. For this, it can fit different types of, a multi-tool, a flashlight, or a spare magazine. I do is I carry a spare magazine, as well as a handheld standalone flashlight, which in this case is a Phoenix UC35 flashlight. Quite bright, quite robust, quite useful. It can still fit in a double stack handgun pouch. I carry around pepper spray, Saber or palm is fine. Either of them are fine. Not every problem is a gun problem. I also carry additional medical supplies on me. I also carry a Blue Alpha. I use a Blue Alpha 1.5 inch carry belt. This is made out of nylon. It fixed with Velcro. If the Velcro breaks, I can have it be repaired with a tailor very inexpensively. I find this belt to be quite good. If I choose to have a leather belt, I use a Magpul El Tejas belt, also 1.5 inches. That is what I use myself. Now, regardless of all this equipment, it doesn't do anyone any good without proper training. Get proper training by a competent instructor. Having a good guitar does not make you a good guitarist, but it helps you along the way. You need to get proper training to use this stuff effectively. That's pretty much what I have to say about this. Don't make the same mistakes as I did. Now, if you did enjoy this video, if you do enjoy this video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't, give it a thumbs down. Comment down below on what you think. Read the video description. And if you'd like to support me, subscribe to my channel and give a little tip in the Ko-fi page down there. Or if you need something for yourself or know what I use and want to get it, check out the affiliate links down below. If you don't want to support me financially or don't have the means to do so, I highly understand that. If you want to show greater support for that means more to me, subscribe and share this video to others. Please, any sort of sources you find useful, share them to others. Not just from me, could be from primary, secondary, could be from Brass Facts, several other sources out there that provide good information out there. And vet it yourself. You know, like, don't just take my word for something. See if it works for you and see if it holds up. Now, if you do enjoy this video on pistols for the prepared citizen, I thank you for watching. Thank you very much.